Hello and welcome to this month's Financial Wellbeing webinar. We're going to look at 8 common financial pitfalls and how to avoid them. So this evening's webinar didn't have any attendees come live, so I'm just going to record the material and the content for tonight because I know many of you listen back to these sessions as you're very busy with all your studies and work and can't always make the set time. So I still want to make sure that you're getting these resources. So welcome, and it's lovely to have you listening back to this recording. My normal welcome slide, I usually like to just acknowledge all the incredible work, research, study that you're all doing across various fields. I know that there's a lot to juggle and there can be a lot of stress generally just as a student, let alone a postgraduate student who's likely to be working and likely to have many other responsibilities in your lives as well, like families, and lots of work responsibilities. So just want to really acknowledge and to say thank you for all of the amazing work and study that you're doing. It's so wonderful to keep up to date with it all and to hear about the great work that you're doing. Before I'd like to start, I'd like to make sure I do the acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands from which we're all connecting or listening to this recorded webinar from today. Pay respects to elders past, present, and recognise and celebrate their connection and role in caring for country over thousands of years. May their wisdom and strength be with us today. So very quickly, just a little bit about myself. My name's Liz McLardy. You may have come across me before listening to some of these webinars, or perhaps you've come along live. Maybe we've even worked together in a one-on-one setting as well. So I'm an accountant by trade. So my background as a CPA, working across a lot of multinational organisations here and both in the UK. So I've worked across those. I've got a lot of different businesses up here, worked in a couple of different industries, from banking to energy to universities to airlines, and most recently now moved into, so I guess the second half of my career has been really spent dedicated to educating the next generation of accountants, but also sharing my love for finance and financial literacy. So I've also gained qualifications in financial counselling as well. And I like to join all of those together and hopefully bring you some great content that can help you with your own finances. So today's webinar, I want to keep it really nice and simple. Firstly, just want to go through a couple of, we've got 8 common financial mistakes or pitfalls that we commonly see and how to overcome them. So some of these may be something that you struggle with or find that, yes, this is a challenge. And then hopefully some of the ideas might give you some ideas of how you might overcome them. So we'll just go through them in turn. In a live setting, there'd be just some discussion. So as you're listening back to this, if you have questions or it prompts you to think about something, please feel free to get in contact with me as well. I'll bring up at the end of the slides how you can do that. So keep that in mind as well as you're working through or listening back to this. So the first pitfall is overspending on non-essentials. So it's likely that you've experienced this. We've all had a bit of this to varying degrees. So obviously the extent of it is the key to whether it's a real challenge or not for you. So the pitfall really is around spending too much on things like eating out, entertainment. Online shopping can be one as well, really easy to just click and purchase, but it can very quickly drain, particularly a student's budget, where you're trying to make sure that you can get your dollars to stretch in a time where you don't have the full capacity to necessarily maximize your earnings, or it may be that you're studying to really work towards increasing your earnings. So it's a bit of a season that's slightly different to what you might see when you're no longer studying or researching. So one of the best ways to kind of overcome this challenge, I guess, around spending too much, and it will be up to you individually what that expenditure might be. We've all got different interests and things that we enjoy, and often our money might go to those. We might fritter away money with particular items. So there's no judgment there, but it's you know, it's that classic know yourself. So you'll be aware of what those things are. And if you're not, and if you're just perhaps at the end of, I guess, realizing that money does seem to slip out of your hands and you don't know where it goes, the best way to overcome this is to really set up a budget. There are previous webinars where I've gone through quite a lot of detail in terms of what you would do to set up a budget, to really focus on and setting boundaries for yourself. So if there are particular things that you enjoy using your money for, really making sure that they're still serving your larger financial goals and that it's all still within a budget that's helping you to achieve those. So budgeting is one of my favorite topics. I could talk all day about it, and be happy to meet up with you as well and work through setting a budget if that's something you feel like would be a beneficial. So I guess I've got a little bit of an example here. So if you're finding yourself eating out, you know, multiple times a week, you know, try implementing different strategies like limiting yourself to maybe one meal out a week, and, you know, really planning and setting what that might be, and then keeping your other meals at home, and really helping, I guess, explain some of that to maybe some of your friends and family that may have a different routine. Maybe they want to spend their money differently. That's perfectly fine. But just, I guess, some of it's around the communication too, to make sure that they know I'm just, you know, say I'm working through, I've got my own financial goals, and, you know, I'm only eating out once a week. You know, where are we going to do that this week, or whatever it might be. So that's our first one. And this kind of leads into this, which is the remedy for the first one. And this pitfall is really about not setting a budget. So most challenges, a lot of our financial challenges become because we haven't actually sat down and planned, and we haven't known, and we haven't taken the time to understand our actual numbers. We'll be making decisions based on poor data. So hopefully that's something that maybe some of you can relate to too, if you're doing a lot of research and analysis and statistics and data collection. You'll know that the better the data, the quality data is going to give you quality output and quality decisions. It's the same for your personal finances. So really important that you take the time to understand your numbers, so know exactly how much money you have coming in. So if I was to ask you, you know, how much do you earn each month? How much money comes in? That's something you should be able to answer, and have a, you know, at least if you don't know off the top of your head, you've got it somewhere. You know that in your, you've got a budget that's worked that out, and same with your expenditures. So really being clear and what's all the money coming in, what's my money going out, really important. So creating that monthly budget, I'd recommend doing it a larger, longer term budget than that. So 6 to 12 months is really helpful, because then you're going to make sure that you're going to plan for some of those one-off expenses as well. And they're often the things that trip us up a bit as well when we're trying to manage our money. We might feel like we're tracking along okay, but then we've got to pay rego, and then we've got to do a servicing of the car and things like that. So when we have 12 months and we look at a whole 12 months, we'll pick up those, and we need to set money aside for those, even if they're just annual expenses, but they need to be budgeted for. So yeah, I always recommend simple tools like Excel. You don't need to go fancy, but some people really enjoy using an app. And sometimes through internet banking, there's a budgeting function as well. So it's really personal, whatever works for you. But I really like to make sure that, you know, you're in control of it. No one, your data's not at risk. So that's really important. And when we're budgeting, to make sure that we sort of really prioritize the essentials first. So that's your house, so rent or mortgage, food on the table, electricity or gas, and then your transport. So those are kind of the most important. And then you'll start to budget for some of those discretionary items as well. So if you don't have a budget, please put one together. The next common challenge is relying on credit cards. So it can be quite a trap to get caught up in buying things with credit cards, and you know, really accumulating a lot of that high interest debt can be a real challenge for people. So stopping that firstly is really important. So if that's a situation that you're in, is to stop using your credit card. So you know, being quite clear with yourself and that decision to no longer use it. So get rid of those credit facilities and then work on a plan of paying off that high interest debt. So rather than using that credit card, using cash or a debit card for all of your purchases. And again, it's kind of where it links in with your budget. So once you've already decided and planned what you're spending your money on, you'll have those boundaries, you'll have those set amounts, and then you can work towards those and put those certain amounts, into the debit card. So if you're spending $200 on groceries a week, when you get paid, you put that into that account and then keep track of it so you can do that. So you're not having to then jump into those credit cards. So really, really expensive and can really just make you feel like you can never get ahead financially. So the best thing to do is to not use them at all. At this point, sometimes people might be thinking, well, what about all of my points? And, I get a free this and that. But what the research shows is that if you use a credit card psychologically, it's not your money. You're going to spend more than if you're using a debit card or cash. So it's likely, again, supported by research, that you would be spending less. So the savings you gain in using a debit card or cash and having a budget far outweigh those points. So if you get 2% or whatever it is for your points, you've got to spend $100,000 to get $2,000 back, in flights or whatever it might be. I guarantee you that if you actually did a budget, you could save that $2,000, and it negates that need for a credit card or wanting those points. It's just a way for them to keep you feeling like you're, it's kind of a bit of a gamification. You keep purchasing something, you get your points and they tell you what they are. There's all a reason to that. They're not just doing it out of the goodness of their heart. So we've got to think, why are they giving me these points? Because they know you're going to spend more, and that means more debt and more income for them. So we want to switch that around and make sure that you're the one who's keeping the income and the savings. So no more credit cards. The next one is not having savings for emergencies. So this can also play in and link to the credit cards as well. So often if we do come across a large expense that we need to pay and we haven't got the money, we then fall into that cycle of using a credit card, and then another one comes along and we use a credit card again. You get yourself deeper and deeper into debt. So once we've made that decision to no longer use credit, when an expense comes along, we need to then look at, what are some of the options? Can we go into a payment plan? Do we have assets or things that we can sell to get to get that money, as opposed to just that quick and easy? And I'm not just talking credit cards, things like Wallet Wizard and buy now, pay later. All of those arrangements are anything where you're not using your own money, you haven't saved up that money to purchase the item, they are to be avoided. So what would be recommended to overcome this, kind of break that cycle and make sure that you do have some money available for emergencies, is to, as a first goal, to build up an emergency fund of even a small amount like $1,000. So you've got that set aside in a high interest saver account that you can easily access if your washing machine breaks down or you need to get something done to your car. You've got money there. And then once you have that $1,000, build it up. As you're earning money, allocate money to build up that emergency fund and build it up to 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. So once you've done that budgeting project and you've worked out what your budget is, you'll know what a full year's worth of expenses are, because you've planned it all out and you've worked it all out. So then you know what that goal is, what that amount needs to be for you. Always really individual, depends on what arrangements you have, how you're living, what your expenses are. So I can't quantify that, but it would be suggested to kind of have, 3 to 6 months worth of expenses is going to be a really nice buffer for you to help you. And it gives you peace of mind as well, because you've got that money there just in case. And that's what I call mine, a just in case fund. So the example that I've got on the screen is, really making sure that if you try to, I guess, how do you practically do this? It might be, working out in your budget how much each week could you put aside to building up that fund. So, and then set up an automatic transfer to make it nice and easy, so you don't need to think about it. So it might be $10 a week, into a separate savings account, whatever it can be, to make sure you're building up that fund. The next one is living beyond your means. So it's a little bit similar to that first one, where we're sort of, some of our spending is a bit out of control. But this one is, it's a little bit different, where we're looking at where we're spending all of our income or more. And it's likely that some of this could be around, cultural or societal pressures, impulse spending. Perhaps we've got some unrealistic expectations, which we all carry due to the media pressures. Maybe we've underestimated costs. Sometimes it's the fear of missing out or overcommitting to lifestyle choices. So really important to kind of take, I guess, really have a realistic look at your financial situation. And when you've done that budgeting activity, you'll see how much income you have coming in and how much is going out. And you don't want the amount going out to be bigger than how much is coming in, because you want goals, you want to achieve. You might want to be buying a house, you might need a new car, or want to go on holidays. So we need to make sure that you've got extra money to put towards those financial goals, as opposed to spending everything or more and going into debt. So I guess a strategy to overcome this and some of those things, I know a lot of those, there's a lot of those topics, and we could probably speak, have a session on each of them, impulse spending, unrealistic expectations, peer pressure, all of those kind of things that are topics on their own. And it's worth, taking that time to sort of self-reflect and look at your relationship with particular things in your life that are costing you money, and to kind of question, is this necessary? Why do I have this? Is this something that I want, or am I doing this because everybody else does? Or do I have this, or do I want this because this is what everyone else does and this is what society is expecting of me? So it's about, kind of honestly looking at that and allowing yourself that opportunity to define, what your financial goals are, and what are some budget-friendly alternatives to some of those things if you may not have the money available at the moment to be putting towards particular things, and prioritizing those and thinking about, what is it that's important to you? So you can often make decisions. It's that funny saying about, is it spending money on things to impress people that you don't like, or something like that? So we need to take a moment to just make sure that everything that we're doing is really in alignment with our own values. I know it's hard. We're going to be influenced a lot. So example here sort of relates back to that first one where we're looking at, if there's maybe eating out a lot. It could be that perhaps, that might be different. You might have friends whose financial situations are different, or their choices are different, and that's okay. But it's checking in with you and your situation and your goals and saying, right, is eating out once a week, that's kind of what works for me. So you can kind of, be involved in that, but maybe suggest an alternative that's like catching up just to go for a walk or a picnic instead of an expensive dinner out. So these sort of things. And you'll have lots of different options and ideas, but a lot of the time it's actually just, which I know is really hard, we're all so busy, but just creating a bit of space and time to kind of think through some of these options and alternatives. It's really usually common sense and straightforward, but it's just giving yourself that chance to think about, what are my options and what do I want? And that's what I guess the power and the beauty of a budget is it puts you in that driver's seat, and it allows you to look at the numbers and know, these are my figures, this is how much is coming in, and then I've got to decide, what purpose I'm going to give every dollar that I earn. And I know that That can be challenging, particularly in the current economic circumstances, that rents and mortgages, houses, it's expensive, but it's really looking at, okay, what is possible? What can I do? And it may be different to what you expected, that you thought that you might be doing. It might be a smaller house than you thought. It might look differently, the way that you live, but that's working within your terms, as opposed to overextending yourself and thinking, well, everybody's doing it, they must be able to afford it. There's no point thinking about that, because you don't know anyone's real true situation. All you can truly know is your own. So it's important to sit down and be really honest about that, and look at what you're comfortable with, what you're comfortable, how extended you are in terms of, particularly when you go into home ownership, how you want that to look and feel. Another big one is ignoring tax obligations. So sometimes we can find people challenged, firstly, in not understanding how much tax they need to pay. And then what can happen at the end of the year is that they get an unexpected tax bill, and they may not have the money to pay for it. They haven't put it aside. So there may be penalties associated with that, which can be really stressful. So what I would, I guess, encourage here to overcome this challenge is to make sure you stay informed about your tax responsibilities. So this is as simple as making sure that if you are working, that you make sure you can do a quick, going to the ATO. They have weekly tax tables that can help you to work out, based on the amount that you're earning each week or fortnight, whatever the basis is, how much tax should be withheld. So you can kind of check whether your employer is doing that correctly. And if you think that they're not, please contact your HR, payroll area or finance. And even if it ends up being that they are doing it correctly, at least you're involved in that conversation, that you can check and just make sure that that's correct. So what should happen is that when you're earning a wage or a salary, your employer will take out tax each week or a fortnight to make sure that you're keeping up with your tax obligations, to prevent that stress of not having paid tax throughout the year and having a big tax bill at the end of the year. So it's really to help you to stay up to date with that. If you're doing a additional job, a second, third job, or a side hustle, really important that you don't claim the tax-free threshold again, because then you'll end up needing to pay more tax at the end of the year. So make sure when you have that second or third job that you're ticking the box to say, no, I'm not claiming the tax-free threshold. So double check that as well with your employer. And if it's perhaps a job that maybe you've started something on the side, or you're doing some consulting, whatever it might be, really important that you put aside, so for every dollar that you earn through that, you put aside 30 cents. So put aside, so you earn $1,000, you'll put the $300 aside into a separate account and just mark that as tax. So that's you keeping up with your tax obligations, and then put that aside. And then at the end of the financial year, you already have that money sitting there. And hopefully it's a little bit too much. That's fine. And then it means at least you've got it all there and ready. So a lot of, as you'll hear already, with finances, it's all about planning and being sort of ahead of the game. That's going to be the key thing to stop any financial strain or pressures. So that's probably the most important things there, to make sure that you're across the tax that you need to pay. And yeah, there's a lot of online tax calculators available. And I'd certainly, don't be afraid to ask your finance or HR area to help you get them to explain it to you if you're not sure. So that's really important as well. The seventh, so we're coming down to our final two. This one is slightly different to credit card debt. So yes, it's a high interest debt, but here I'm also looking at payday loans, personal loans, car loans, anything that's not a house. So anything that you've borrowed money for that, what we'd say as accountants, is a depreciating asset. So its value declines over time, as opposed to real estate, its value is going to most of the time increase over time. So there's a bit of a different relationship between having a mortgage. You still want to pay that off. You don't want to be paying off a mortgage, and you certainly want it to be paid off by the time you retire. But there's a different, it's not as, it doesn't have the same stress associated with it as high interest personal consumer debt has, because it's just expensive. So it's not only that you've bought the item, but you're paying the interest on it, and then you're paying it again, and penalties. And so it's a really difficult cycle to get into, out of, easy to get into. They'll have all sorts of ads and convincing ways. They're like, oh yes, in that situation where your hot water system's not working and you need to have it straight away, here's Wallet Wizard, and you can borrow whatever money you want at 40% interest or something, and they'll put all of that in the small writing. So again, always try to give yourself a little bit of space before jumping into those decisions, and checking in with, are they really an emergency? So, what are my options? What are my alternatives? And even to give yourself a little bit of space, what are some sort of short-term changes? Can I go and buy a camping shower to heat up my water, just for a couple of days until I kind of get my head around this and work out what could be some of my options? Don't rob yourself of some of those creative solutions as well. So if it is that you're in the situation where you do have a lot of those consumer debt facilities, the key thing to overcome them is really to prioritize paying off the high interest debt as soon as possible. They've, again, research around this in terms of what is the best approach. So some people will pay off the highest interest debt first. The research actually shows that the reason why you got into debt isn't actually a mathematical reason. It was behavioral. So to undo it and to get out of it is usually most effective using behavioral successful techniques. And that one is actually to, if you've got a number of consumer debts, is to actually list them all out in terms of the quantity, the size of the debt. So from smallest to largest. So you might have a credit card that's got $500 owing. You might have a second credit card that's got $1,000 owing. You might have a car loan that's got $5,000. Rank them from lowest to largest. So quantities. You need to make sure that you keep up with the minimum payments on all of them, but then any extra money goes towards paying off that smallest one first. So nothing to do with the interest rate, but what it will do is it will build your momentum and to pay off those debts. So you'll pay off that small one quick, and you'll get a quick windfall, and you'll see, right, that one's gone. And then you'll keep going, and then you'll start doing the next one, put all your extra money towards it, and then it will be gone. And then you've got the largest one left, and then you work towards that. So a lot of the research is supporting that as a strategy, but again, up to you to work through how you want to approach those. But the key outcome that you're aiming for is to get them paid off as quick as possible, because all of those payments then become extra money in your budget that you can put towards building up that emergency fund more, and can put towards a down payment for a house. So it just really will change your whole financial situation once you've got rid of those high interest consumer debts. So really important to get rid of those. And our final one is impulsive decisions. So this does link in, there's threads here of these that do sort of connect together, but that's the final key one that I'm going to cover off tonight. It's really around making impulsive financial decisions, and often these are unplanned purchases or investments. Sometimes it can be so convincing that it's a sale and it's only today, and if you don't get it today, then it's going to be gone. If it's a car or whatever it might be, you'll find that sellers want to put that pressure on you to try and make an impulsive decision, but you always, wherever possible, give yourself space to think through the decision, to make sure it's the right one for you. It's aligned to what you've been working towards and planning, that you've got the money available, what the impact of the decision will be. And it's very unlikely that it needs to be done within 24 hours. So always give yourself that 24-hour rule. You know, it might even be that you're online and you can see the sale popping up and you've got to buy it. You're much better off to give yourself that 24 hours, put the shopping item in the shopping cart if you're online, and then just give that pause to just assess and think through it, even talk about it with the partner if you're co-managing money, that kind of thing. So just, yeah, really give yourself that time to, particularly if it's a significant amount of money, if it's a large investment or if it's a home, take that time to evaluate, look at the pros and cons, what are the impacts. Really important to do that as well. So I know that's common sense, but sometimes we forget these things when we're managing our money. So that's sort of the 8 common financial pitfalls and how to overcome them that I was going through today. And as I mentioned at the beginning, if you do have any questions that you have, as you've heard me talk through these, it sparked something particular for you, please don't hesitate to reach out to me via email, or you can book in a one-on-one Zoom session with me as well if you'd like to do, you know, some help, perhaps putting a budget together, or just, you know, having somebody as a bit of a soundboard as you're thinking some things through. I'm happy to do that. So the SCPA provide free sessions with me. So if you go through them to the skills@scpa.net.au, send them an email and just ask that you would like to get in contact with me, Liz McLardy, and that they can then pass on your details to me, and we can I can email or set up a Zoom meeting time with you. So I hope that that's been helpful and you've been able to gain something from listening through those 8 common financial pitfalls as you've listened to this. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope that I can catch up with you at the next month's financial wellbeing webinar. I think we're looking at money personality, so the different personalities that we commonly have when we're relating to finances and money decisions. Sometimes it can be helpful to kind of think about that and reflect on our own personality towards money. And sometimes that reflection can help us to then consider whether we'd like to make any changes, or where we can see that our personality can be both a positive and a negative. So they all bring different things to the table, but really great just to kind of increase some of our self-awareness around our money personality. So that's our next month's topic. So I hope to look forward to seeing you, or hopefully you can listen back to that one as well. But thanks again for listening, and I hope that you've enjoyed this. So thank you.